Hello and welcome to Nikki and Joe Discussing Series. My name is Josiel Vasconcelos, but you can call me Joe.
And I am Nicole Camille, also known as Nikki, and we are two Brazilian advanced English students. I'm an English teacher.
And I'm an accounting student, and I'm passionate about the language.
And we have found here on this podcast a new way to have fun while we practice English.
If you love TV series just like we do, stay with us every week when we watch and talk about all the details of the episodes.
Don't forget to follow us on our Instagram, Nikki Joe Podcast, and stay tuned for upcoming episodes. Hello, welcome back to Nikki and Joe Discussing Series. Today we're going to divide the episode in two parts. The first part, we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 2 of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
In the second part, we're going to talk about Episode 3. We'll be putting in the description when the first episode ends and the next begins so that you can choose which one you want to listen to.
The episode 2 is titled Bang the Drums, Ashley. This episode was aired in September 17, 1990, and was directed by Debbie Allen and written by Shannon Goggin. This is the episode which Ashley quits playing violin and starts playing drums, and the family is not happy about it. So let's see what happens on this episode.
In the first scene, we see Philip in his house. He's complaining about work, and he's saying that the only moments that he has some peace during his day is when he's at home with his family because of some renovations that are happening in his office. And Will starts singing "I Got the Power" from his bedroom, and it annoys his family, especially his uncle, because his uncle had just said that he wanted some peace. And after that, Will comes downstairs, Ashley saying that she has tennis class, but she actually had violin class, was it?
Yes.
And after that's the scene when Will's making fun of her. And then Vivian wants Hillary to take Ashley to her class, but Hillary's saying that she doesn't want to do it because she's against the pollution that it causes.
Yeah, again, Hillary with
Again,
her,
talking about global warming.
global warming, social causes, and I was gonna just say about the ridiculous joke that Carton makes about Ashley showing up on her violin class wearing her tennis classes outfit.
Carlton is a little stupid sometimes. But I don't know why I like him.
Yeah, I like him too. It was just a silly joke, and Will kind of didn't like it.
It was so funny when Will made that face.
Yeah.
Like, oh, my cousins are so stupid.
Yes.
And again, Hillary talks about climate change, like about global warming. But again, she doesn't care about it. She said that she would only do this if it was a carpool. And then Vivian says that it was a carpool, and Hillary says that she just didn't want to do it, as usual. And then after that, Vivian says that she wants Will to take Ashley to her violin class. And as it is a carpool, he has to take all the other kids with him. And he has to bear with like 1 hour with the kids playing the violin in the car, which is a torture for him.
And I think at some level he starts to have fun. And also, I think it's interesting to point out that Phil is giving him a new responsibility because he's living on his home, on Philip's house. So it's important for Will to learn how to have responsibilities. So I think it was important and an important thing to teach Will that responsibilities are necessary.
And also it's nice that they trust Will to take them to the class.
Okay.
Like, even if they know that he's not the most responsible person, they still trust him to take her, to drive Ashley to her class.
That's true. But I think this might change sometime in the future.
After that, they get in the class, and Will has to wait until the class finishes to take Ashley back home. And it's quite a torture for him again to listen to the music for an hour. And after that, we see they all get in the class, getting in the room, and they are singing I got the power because Will taught them in the car. And I think it's important to mention that this is the beginning of Will's influence on Ashley because she's starting to feel more interested about different kind of music and stuff. Like she wants to be a little more like Will, right? And after the class, she mentions that she doesn't actually like playing violin. She just does it because her father wants her to, because she doesn't want to disappoint her father, right? Because she
Yes.
thinks like it's the right thing to do. And but of course she doesn't understand like that she is not obligated to do this. And Will says that she doesn't have to do it just because her father wants her to.
And
And
he says something about Ashley being more like Phil, and he says that there's no space for another Phil on Earth, something like that. He does this fat joke that we're gonna see a lot on the series, unfortunately. But I'm just preparing you guys for these types of joke. So yeah.
right. After the scene, it cuts to their house, and we see Ashlyn with a set of drums making a lot of noise. And then Philip and Vivian hear it, and then when they go to see what's happening, they see that Ashley has this set of drums, and they are angry. They are not happy about it. And Will says that, and he said that he got these drums in change for the violin in a pawn shop. And he's saying that Ashley likes the drums more than the violin, and she doesn't have to do this just because Philip wants to. And then Phil, he says that he doesn't want her playing the drums. He just wants her to play the violin because when he was younger, his parents couldn't afford violin classes, and he always appreciated like classical music, and this was something that he wanted like really bad because, as he says, he was always like passionate about classical instruments. And after that, Vivian says that he used to listen a lot to James Brown, which is a little controversial because we know that Philip, he doesn't approve this kind of music in his house, and Will starts making fun of him after this, and he just lets Ashley play the drums because Vivian convinces him to, and she says that he used to listen to James Brown. And something that I thought was interesting about this scene is something that I had already suspected, but it was interesting because we can notice that Philip, he wants his kids to have things that he couldn't afford when he was younger, which is usually normal, right? Parents usually wants their kids to have things that they couldn't afford, but it's not fair with his kids because actually, it's obvious that she doesn't like any of these things. And
Yeah, it's. I agree with you. I think it's that. I think it's something. It's a problem that it's not from our. It's not a problem that we can relate much because none of us are rich, and
mm,
we. It's like that. Rich people's problems because
yes.
we don't have this opportunity to. We didn't have when we were growing up. This opportunity to practice. Many instruments, or at least one in my case. For example, I didn't have the chance to learn an instrument when I was growing up. And imagine doing four or five other, sports, learning music. I think that a couple years ago, we saw that this was causing many problems to these children who has this kind of opportunities because they would grow anxious people because they would have to do many things at the same time. They would have to be good, succeed. Sorry, they would have to succeed in many things, and their family expects them to be successful people. So because they had the chance to learn more things than most people, so there's this pressure on them, and this is a problem that not all of us face. but
Yes.
still it's a problem for some part of the society. And
It's quite common in some families, but
yeah,
like usually it's more in some rich families. But it also happens like when there is some legacy in the family. Like some families are not rich, but for example, the parents, they have a company or something like this. They have a company, or they, like
mm,
both parents might follow the same profession and they want the kids to follow the same path, and they want the kids to be just as successful as they are. I used to work in a company that the owner, he used to manage the company with his wife and his two sons. I used to think a lot about it, like, because I used to think if the kids are really that interested in the company, in that kind of job, because it was just something that their parents wanted them to do, and then I think they didn't have many options. It's
yeah,
a pressure. And then Philip agrees. Actually, he doesn't agree with Ashley playing the drums, but he just gives in. And Will says that he already hired an instructor for Ashley. And then who gets in the house is a friend of Will's, Jess, which is funny because this is not an actual name. And Phil makes this joke, like saying that this is not his name, it cannot be his name because this is not a name of a regular person.
yeah. And I think Phil is a little bit bored because Jess is like noticing the things that they have on the house. When Philip introduces himself to Jess, he says, "I'm Mr. Banks," and Jess says, "Yeah, I can see that. Like Mr. Banks, bank, where the money
Mm,
comes from."
thank- yes.
So it's like Philip's a little bit worried. Don't you think so?
No, no.
Not now.
I didn't pay much attention to this scene, I guess.
Mm,
Okay, so then they leave the room and they start this family reunion in the living room when they just stay sitting on the couch, listening to classic music, having some tea, which is it seems very boring for us because this is not a regular type of reunion that we would have with our family, right?
and for us and for Hillary, it's boring.
Yeah, for Hillary too. And something that I thought interesting is because it kind of breaks some stereotypes, right? Because like this is usually a stereotype for white people, I guess. Like as if
Actually,
black people
it's more like a British people tradition. So
yeah,
that when
it's more British
Jeffrey
because British are
when Jeffrey started working on the bank's house, he kind of took some traditions there, and they started doing. Um,
do they mention when Jeffrey started working in their
no, they
house?
never. I haven't seen that yet. But there's a episode where they kind of see a little bit of Jeffrey's past. So have
Hmm.
to watch the series to learn.
I always I always wondered if they were focused a little more on Jeffrey.
They're gonna do some episodes where they're gonna tell a little bit about him, but
Hmm.
there's no Jeffrey centric episode. But there are episodes where they're gonna mention him, where we're gonna see a little bit more about his story. So you have to watch until the end to know more about Jeffrey's life.
Yes. And they are reunited in the living room having some tea as a part of a family tradition, I guess. And Ashley starts playing the drums very loud because Jazz is teaching her how to play the drums. And it starts annoying the entire family because they cannot have a moment of peace. They were like listening to classical music, and the moment is ruined because of Will and Ashley and Jess. And then Phil calls them to join the family so that they all can enjoy the moment together. They go downstairs, and Will is acting funny because he thinks that all is like sort of a joke for him, I guess.
And then Jazz enters, and we see that Jeffrey is a bit worried about the cutlery, the forks and spoons, because Jess is kind of analyzing them, and they're
Mm-hmm.
listening to this classical music on a vinyl disc. And then Phil asks someone to turn up the volume, and Will says to Jess, Jess, crank that up.
Language Corner.
Would someone turn it up for me, please? Jazz, crank it up for me.
Crank up is a phrasal verb that means to raise the volume or to intensify something. So when he says that to Jess, when he says crank that up, he actually meant turn up the volume and not scratch the vinyl. That it's what Jess understands. And that's it for the language corner.
And since Jess ruins the family reunion, Philip he throws him out of the house, like literally. And something that is important to mention is that this scene when Philip throws Jess out of the house, it's the same scene, like the same clip that they use in every episode. Like all the episodes, they just take the same scene and put like in the episodes. They don't record a new one.
Yeah, they're gonna do that for a while, but then they're gonna record like two different tapes with other clothes, but it's basically the same scene, and they're gonna repeat that for like 5, 6 years. So, yeah, it's gonna be a long
It's
time
easier.
just with that same clothes. We're gonna see him all the time wearing that same clothes.
Yeah, that's easier.
Yeah, and then when Vivian saw that scene, she made some kind of joke and told Philip that living close to Ronald Reagan is not a good influence for Philip. Just so you know, Ronald Reagan was an actor and a president of the United States. He was a conservative president
Mm-hmm.
during the 1981 to 1989. Just for you guys to know what was going on in the US around that time, because the episode was aired in 1990. So
And Philip starts having second thoughts about actually playing the drums because I think he might be concerned that Ashley can be having a bad influence from Will and from Jess, and he wants her to quit the drums and he wants her to return to her violin lessons. And Will states that she doesn't like it. She doesn't have to do this just because of Philip, and he's saying that Ashley should just play the drums because she likes it more because she's younger, and he says that Ashley doesn't like the violin, and Ashley confirms like, oh yeah, I don't like the violin. And then Will's kind of bragging because he was right and Ashley is going to play the drums. But then she says like, yeah, I don't like the drums either. And then she says that she was just doing this because she didn't want to disappoint anyone. And then Will and Philip, they get a little disappointed because both of them wanted Ashley to do something
yes,
like
Will
something that
was
they liked.
really excited
And
for actually Ashley playing the drums. Like he was exactly like Phil was
mhm.
about her playing violin. So, and then they are like, she doesn't want to do anything. She doesn't want to learn anything. And Will says that they blame television. He blames television. But did you
I don't know
enjoy
if
this
I do know.
episode? Because for me, this is one of my least favorites. I don't know until now.
I guess I enjoyed it because usually in the beginning of the TV shows, we don't see many strong moments. Like we don't see many funny episodes. It happens with a lot of shows that
Yeah,
I have,
that's true.
a
It
lot
was
of
the second
comedy
episode.
shows
Yeah,
that I've
that's
seen.
true.
Episode 3, Clubba Hubba. This episode was directed by Jeff Melman and written by Rob Edwards and was aired in September 24, 1990. This is the episode which Will has to impress a very rich and successful father so that he can go out with his daughter. So let's see what happens in this episode.
The episode starts with Hillary and her friend talking about people who are passing by them on the country club. They are talking about their clothes and their looks. And this is like just for us to see how lightheaded she is, shallow, a bit shallow,
Mm-hmm.
like you said before. Then we see Will embarrassing his whole family because he's accidentally, air quotes, driving a cart inside of the club, and then everyone is embarrassed because of him. And Carton mentions that because of that, they're probably not gonna be treated as well as they are treated there. So he's a bit upset about it. But Will says that that's fine for him because the place is whack. And this is my language corner.
Language Corner.
Board privileges. Man, that's fine with me, man. This place is whack. I'm out of here.
This place is whack, Will says. Whack is a slang that serves as an adjective to refer to something that is strange or crazy. A variation of this slang is the noun wacko, that means that the person is crazy. For example, that guy is a wacko. So, and then here we have two slangs in one language corner. And after that scene that he says that he doesn't care if he's gonna keep going to the country club, he immediately sees a girl and he's like already impressed with her and he like wants to date her as soon as he sees her. And Carton says that she's Mimi and that it's really difficult to go out with her because her father is really strict and she only dates guys that are a little bit like himself, and that her father is too strict and the guy who is going to date her needs to be successful and needs to have his whole life figured out already. So at that moment, they kind of start like a bet to see if Will is really capable of impressing Mimi's dad and if he's able to go on a date with her. And then we cut to the house, and Carton starts to teach Will how to walk and talk pompously, like the way he does, and how to use the special cutlery. And soon basically the whole house starts to get involved into Will's transition to these different men.
Mm-hmm. To this
And
polite guy.
yes, fancy. And then it's like, for me, it's like they're making fun of this kind of behaviors because there's a scene when Phil says to Will when he's trying to use the cutlery, listen to me carefully. Which one is the shrimp fork? So it's like they are implying, right, to the audience that these kinds of things are ridiculous. And this whole time that we're seeing this scene of Will training and failing, making fool
Mm-hmm.
of himself. There's a song in the background. It's like a circus song, and reminds me of Charles Chaplin's films.
Uh-huh.
And because we see like Will falling down of the sofa, and we don't see much lines during this scene. It's like a long scene with few lines.
I thought it was really interesting in this scene the fact that Will and Carlton they are like already getting along, and that was a little unexpected because I didn't expect them to get along so fast, right? Because this is just the second episode, and Carlton is like helping Will on his own wish. I thought it was really nice because of the way they are getting along, They seem to be already friends. Even
Yes,
though
but
Will doesn't like Carlton so much, or at least
yeah,
he
but
didn't used to. He didn't like Carlton so much, at least.
yeah, but let's remember that this is a bet, so it's like Carlton is helping him, but he's still like wanting him to not succeed. But yeah, it's nice that he is helping him.
But the scenes
Like,
of them two together, it's nice because you can see that they are having fun together.
yeah, they seem to be bonding, right?
Uh-huh. It's not something that I would expect so fast.
Yeah. And then we see this scene where Vivian shows up when Carlton and Will is like training how Will's gonna ask Mimi to go out with him, and then she jokes about them getting along. Like she says, "I didn't know that you were getting along so well, that well." So I thought it was a funny thing.
Mm-hmm.
And another scene, another line on this episode, because at this part that I'm talking about, when the circus song is playing, we don't see many lines, right? And then again, we see Vivian. Vivian shows up to make a joke about Philip, because Philip is telling Will how he used to get girls during his young age, and Vivian shows up again to make a joke, implying that the way he used to do it was not so effective. And I love how in these little things we can see Vivian's personality and how she's strong and bossy, and funny at the same time. So yeah, and at the end of this whole scene that seems to be a bit long, because at the end everyone's like starting to sleep because we're still trying to know how to use the cutlery, the special forks and stuff. And then he's
Mm-hmm.
finally able to do that, and he finishes his training, and then we cut to the country club where we see Philip sitting with his friend talking about people who are walking by them. And it's the same scene basically of Hillary talking about people's clothes and looks. So it's the same thing, the same shallow and materialistic conversation Phil is having with his friend. So it was really,
Do you think this is an aspect of their family or maybe just of rich people?
it's like, I think they're like showing how rich people is. So it's like they are kind of mimicking what, in a funny and maybe overreacted way, of how rich people on these places behave.
Mm-hmm.
So I found really funny that scene. And finally, we see that Will was able to impress Mimi's dad, and he believes everything about this new character that Will created. And then Mimi's father introduces Will to Mimi, and Mimi, when they are alone, Will and Mimi, she says that she doesn't want to go out with people with a guy like Will. She uses the word whitewashed. Like again, what we were discussing on the last episode, it's like Will is here is acting like Carton, so he's acting like the opposite of the stereotype that is attributed to black men. And again, this is a term, and this term and this assumption is a little tricky, uh, because of all that we have discussed on the last episode, right? So, and she says that she's actually interested in dangerous guys. So she wants to date someone that is really the opposite of her father and of what her father expects her to do.
I think this is what happens when the parents want their kids to be an image of what they are or of what they want to be themselves. Because it also happens with Ashley and Philip. Like Philip wants Ashley to play the instrument, but in fact Ashley just doesn't like any of those things, right? Like she just wants to do the things that she likes, like which is very different from what Phil likes. And the same happens with Mimi and her father because Mimi's father wants her to date just polite and rich guys, right? Guys that are
Successful.
successful.
Yeah.
And we can see that this is a kind of a pattern that happens with parents that raise their kids to follow their steps.
So it's like they are like showing the adult version of Ashley, right? That contrast between what uh, the children, the daughters and sons really want and what their parents expect from them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we cut back to the Banks house, and we see Hillary doing a fat joke again. So it's the third episode, and we see the third fat joke. And then she says like, because Mimi had this lipo procedures to get thin, but she still has the a fat mind, something like that, because she still wants to eat a lot, and she's not gonna change. It's basically that what Hillary is saying, and yeah, but Will doesn't care, and
Yeah, but coming from Hillary, it doesn't surprise me.
yeah, that's true. So then we see Vivian giving an advice to Will that he should act like himself to impress Mimi. There was not much else that he could do. That so she's saying that the best way is to be who you are, and then Will tells Carton that he's gonna do the opposite of that, and that he's gonna be this dangerous guy to Mimi, and that Carton has to help him, like to say to agree with him, to say that he's a felon, and he's a runaway felon, right? And then Will starts to act a little bit like a jerk, and he makes up this line to impress her.
I just want to mention something very quick. After this scene when tells Carlton that he's not going to be himself, and again Carlton helps him be look like a more dangerous guy, and I think it was nice because we know that it's kind of a battle between them, right? But we don't see much competition between them
Yeah,
because I can see that Carlton is willing to help Will, and we can see that in this episode just focus on Will trying to get Mimi, trying to go out with her. And I thought it was nice this fact that we couldn't see much competition coming from Carlton. He was being nice to Will. Really wanted to help him. I think he really wanted to help him.
yeah, that's true. Because I think he tried so much to impress Mimi himself that now he
Hmm.
wants to see if someone is going to be able to go out with her. I don't
Yeah, deep down he just wants to confirm that Will is not gonna make it.
know. Yeah. And Mimi starts to fall for his act, like he's walking like a criminal, if there is such thing. She starts to fall for his act, and she agrees to dance with him. And Will is there wearing sunglasses and a hat. And Mimi's father shows up, and he has to pretend he's a poised, he's a very uptight guy, and he has to take off the hat and the glasses and talk to him in a different manner, and then he goes back to her and start talking to her in a different way and act in a different way. So he's starting to get like really confused because he has to play two different characters, and then he just give up doing that, and he tells her that she's not worth so much work, and because he has to scare her and impress her father at the same time. So he says that no girl is fly for him to go through all this trouble for. And then he immediately sees another girl, and he goes after this girl immediately. And at the moment, it's like it can we can take two things out of this. I think this is basically a metaphor for what he faces, because back in Philly, he had to portray himself as this sly boy, like, how can I say that? He had to be this tough guy. And in Bel-Air, people expect him to act in certain ways, to fit in. And it's interesting to see that at the end, he chooses to be this goofy version of himself, and that he follows what Aunt Viv said, right? He
Hmm.
tells Mimi that that he's done with the act, and then when he goes chasing that other girl, I think and we got to see how he's a bit of a man whore. Don't you think he's a bit of a man
A
whore?
little bit, a little bit.
Yeah, because he is already like checking out the woman.
We can see that we can see where he has problems.
Yes. So in the third episode, we learned that about him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we cut back to the house, and Will tells Jeffrey, and they're playing chess. I don't know. It seems to be that, but I don't know if they're really playing. And it's like they're talking, and then Hillary shows up with this really weird, shiny white suit. And then she talks about again, she was on how can I say that? A social awareness event. And again,
Mm-hmm.
see that she's not really interested in the event itself, but in the people who attend to this event. She mentions Tom Cruise that he was there, and then we can see that about her, this personality trait of hers. And then Will is kind of bragging to Jeffrey that he was getting to know this other girl in the party, and that he got into trouble because he didn't know that she had a husband. And then we see that he has like a punch mark on his eye. And
Yeah, he was wearing glasses.
yes, and then again we see this thing about his personality, how he has a bad luck with the ladies, because he
Yeah, I think he
some
just falls for women too easily.
yes, it's crazy.
Just something that I want to mention about this episode is because I think that the subject of girls being attracted to dangerous guys, I think it was sort of something common, some tendency back in the day, because maybe just in movies. I'm not sure if it was like in reality. But I remember that in Everybody Hates Chris, there is an episode that the girls just like bad guys, and they show these magazines of these rappers that seem to be like bad guys, and Chris is trying to impress Tasha, and he knows that she doesn't like him the way he is, so he tries to be like a bad guy to impress her, so
Yeah,
that she can fall for him. And for this reason, I think it was something common back in the day, because as they showed like the same decade, I think it was something common back in that time,
yeah.
like
And
girls
I
falling for bad
must
guys.
I
Also because of in that time, this kind of rap music was very common, this style of rappers being bad, and their style, their fashion,
yeah,
and their personality, I think was something very common, not just in movies, but also in music in general.
but I have to say that this bad guy and bad girl effect still happens nowadays, because not when the person is totally bad, but
Mm-hmm.
for me most characters that I find it interesting, uh, they are bad a little bit. um, they are kind of a bit of a villain, and then they turn good. So there is this bad guy effect, going on that still
Mm-hmm.
impresses people.
Yes.
I don't know what
I don't know
happens
why.
to us. Yeah, we have to understand that for later episodes, maybe maybe for
Yes.
later episodes of our
For
podcast.
further moments.
Yes.
Do you still have any comments?
No, that's it.
And for you, what was the funniest scene of this episode? Did you choose
Oh, the funniest
specific
scene for
one
me
specific scene?
was the scene of Uncle Phil. Uh, it's like they are taking so seriously the situation of well using the right fork, that it becomes it's so serious in a way that it becomes ridiculous. And it
Yes.
was really funny, like carefully pick the right fork to use the with the shrimps, that scene for me was the funniest. And also because that actor is amazing. So, yeah.
Yes. For me, I guess it was the scene when Jeffrey is trying to teach Will how to approach a woman. And Jeffrey just does it so perfectly that Will immediately falls for him, going after him.
Yeah.
Just this scene. Yeah, this episode was funnier than the
Yeah,
second
I
one,
thought the same.
but this one was fun, the funniest moment for me.
Yeah, I love this episode.
So that was it for today. Thank you for listening to our podcast,
And don't forget to follow us on our Instagram, Nikki Joe Podcast.
and hope to see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. See you.